Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone, as always, it is co-host Alan Niven. Bonjour, Alan. How are you? Oh, sorry, Sir Alan.
I should think so too. I think I got a knighthood yesterday.
That's right.
I'm good.
That's good. Yeah. And the other voice you're hearing is Frankie Sullivan of course, Survivor. And the reason we're calling him Sir Alan is that yesterday I got a fan letter, and it was all talking about how they love Sir Alan, Sir Alan, Sir Alan, Sir Alan. So now he is now going to be Sir Alan from this point forth. But as we say also in Montreal, bonjour, Frankie. How are you? Nice to have you back, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Mitch. It's nice to be back. So wait, before we go, Alan, so have you been knighted, or have you been knighted by us players, musicians? Sir.
Knighted by a fan,
thing.
Frankie.
Yeah, that's what. Well, I could say a few other things, but I'll be the artist. I won't.
It was a fan who called me Sir Alan, so I told Mitch, let's take it.
I think it's got a lot of humor to it. I like it's a play on words. I like it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how's things with you in Illinois, Frankie? How's your summer? Are you dealing with all this bullshit and COVID?
You know what? It's funny you mention that, Mitch. I was going to tell you this a couple of days ago. Man, I kind of settled into this whole China virus, whatever Corona thing. I figured, well, because you go through these inner battles, I'm going to travel, I'll fly, I'll do it this way, and I'll do it that way, and then you hear of one of your friends that gets it, and you barely survived. And I just settled in and said, I think I'll go through my amps and my guitars. And I got my favorites on. Then I went to, I have a favorite batch of amps, and I need one other one. I found one in Norway, so that was a 3-month thing. And then, I've been working on my guitar tone and playing, which has been, it's always a sanctuary. It's never jaded. So I just put my energy and focus in researching. I have boxes of all of our old photos, and actually I found 2 full of tour itineraries. You remember those? Leg 2. That went up to leg 14. Alan, and Mitch, it went up to leg 14, and I said, okay, that's enough for today. But I kind of settled in and said, I'll just hang out till November. See what goes on. Now, while you're hanging out, do you go through the box of tapes and find unreleased demos or find live versions and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I could put this together as some kind of compilation or box set, or is there any music lying around that might, is there the acoustic version of Eye of the Tiger or something? There's a lot of really good unreleased, and for a bucket of reasons, material and stuff that we recorded with the producers at the time, and outtakes and things that didn't make the record. And, you listen to them now, and some of them I understand, and then the ones that have kind of a story that I don't really like, but whatever, it's fact, I don't really understand because they're so good. They're kind of okay, this is a rough next roll. Some of these, I have cassettes still, because that's what they came on back then. Some of these cassettes, I would just put them on a piece of vinyl or put them on a CD or put them out and let people listen to them, because some of them are really good.
Right.
You always have the
Frankie,
dogs where, yes.
Frankie, there was no such thing as a demo disc. The record companies used to call them unreleased masters. And when you had a hit, boy, oh boy, those things that you thought you were doing quick in the afternoon just to feel out a song and see if it had shake. No, it becomes an unreleased master and eventually finds its way out. And there's an awful lot of songs that you go back and go, that's kind of curious. It didn't fit with everybody's idea of an album at the time, but it's got its merits. So put it out.
Let me ask you about that for both of you.
I agree, Alan. It's interesting. It's very interesting.
In terms of the business, though, You know, a lot of times when you're recording, the record company will say, okay, you're going to go in and do Appetite for Destruction. You're going to go in and do Eye of the Tiger. Whatever you record, if there's 30 songs, they're all ours. The heck with you. Was that something that you ran into a lot where they sort of said, everything that you've recorded is ours? And did you then therefore have to sort of record some stuff secretly off the books without letting, I mean, is it sort of that, like a spy caper where to get your songs out, or did you have a freedom to record demos and just have them to be yours? Frankie?
Well, for us, we were lucky because now, and you can dig this, because you would say of all people, the Scotty brothers never toiled or bothered us with our creations or our process or what should be on a record. I don't remember them ever even approaching us. Well, this shouldn't be on, that shouldn't be on, which is kind of a blessing. But I do remember that, especially early on in my really formative years, because I got lucky really young. I talked to you about this before, Mitch. The producers I worked with were so good that everybody was kind of always on board. And I always felt like, well, if I'm going to hire a guy with a ridiculous, crazy good reputation for doing amazing work, and, their bio is like, okay, I grew up listening to that music. They just, and again, Alan, at the time, you don't realize this, they let us alone with our songs, with the process. Maybe they stopped down to the studio a couple of times, but they never interfere with our creative process. So we never had that record company kind of meddling in. And then, of course, John, Alan, you must know John Burke wouldn't let him do that anyhow, because one thing he always appreciated was the creative process, and he entrusted us and our producers to get it done. I got an email. I still send emails from him, and I had found a German, a lead tooth from Germany, and there was a picture of him, and I sent it to him. I said, "Gee, it looks like you're reprimanding me." And he sent me it back, and I don't remember reprimanding you with a big smiley face. Of course he did. He said, "But we did differ about world, and now you can appreciate this, going across the ponds, playing wherever you can play." And I don't really know if we did, but he ended it with, "Aren't you glad I made you go?" So that was another case of, I think, good direction when you're young, but also going. There was a lot of, they let us along our creative process, and then when it came to touring, I was very young and I just wanted to go out and play, but we had a lot of good direction. And I always say this, even though it started before that, when Rocky 3 came out, that was the best video you could ever have for a song. So, and that was a hit all over the world. So we just started going. So they let us along. John said, "I always trusted," and he said this to you, "I always trusted you with the creative process. We may have differed, probably because I was young, but I did go anyhow with going to the countries we went to at one time. But maybe when you're young, you're nervous. I don't really remember, but I went." He said, "But I always trusted you with the music and the creative stuff with like the producers." So we always had really good feedback. They let us alone. They really did.
See, that's
well,
that.
Frankie, correct me if I'm wrong, Frankie, but am I right in remembering that you say you were young, but didn't you do a lot of studio work prior to Survivor? I mean, you obviously knew your stuff and knew your chops and knew the studio, and that's a good reason to leave you alone, because you know what you're doing. Am I right in remembering that?
Yeah, see, Mitch, spoken like a true, really good manager. You are correct. And it's oddly enough, I really didn't put that, I think that, but I never really put that into the words you just did, but I did. I got around quite a bit. And, Alan, I always believed in being quietly effective. So if I had friends or met people, like, let's just take like an Eddie Money, for example, or like a John Wayton, there was kind of a vibe, and they would invite me, and yeah, Alan, it would segue doing other things in the studio, and I always liked it. Although I'll tell you a story about perspective with that. I always liked it enough, and it was Richie Zito, Alan. You probably know him. He's a great guy. He said to me one day, "The thing is, when you do the work, not everybody else may know or needs to know, but the people in the studio, like the assistant engineers, the studio managers, the session guys, they all kind of know. They're aware of a different thing that people do. May not be out there in the public, but amongst the studio managers and owners and the players that people are and stuff, I kind of had a little bit of it in there, and I liked it. I really loved it."
Well, Frankie, I've always had, you might find this a strange perception, but I've always had a viewpoint that there were basically only 6 songs that existed. I love you, I hate you, I feel good, I feel bad, the world is wonderful, the world is screwed up. And once I got that perception, it clarified for me that what people connect to is the personality, the character, and the idiosyncrasy of the performer and the artist. And the best thing you can do is support the confidence of the artist so that they really do express themselves, because that's the magic. You connect to the person.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. That I think, to me, is like writing a song that works and it becomes a hit song because it's endeared by so many people. For who knows, everybody hears a song and has a different take from it. But when it rings enough bells with enough people, that's how I relate to that connection. So back again, maybe that's why they let us be. Maybe that's why they never interfere with our creative process.
Well, one thing is evident, Frankie, is that you definitely had the ability to connect to, and forgive this terminology because it can be taken the wrong way, but I used to call it hitting the main vein. And the main vein to me was a collective consciousness where you didn't have to rely on a song to be played and played and played on the radio for it to finally permeate into an audience. But you had a song that, and I love the terminology used, rang bells. And it rang bells in lots of people's hearts and minds. And that's hitting the main vein. And you certainly hit the main vein more than once.
Well, it's nice of you to say. But it's also interesting because I heard "High on You" on the radio like last week, and I turned it up and I was listening. You know, it's such a like pure pop song. You know what I'm saying? It's very poppy. But when I listen to it, I think that it's really good. The performance, the lead vocal performance, is phenomenal. It sells the song, and I think the lyrics. A lot of people can relate to it. And I always looked at it like, you know, everybody's going to say, "Oh, I love all my songs," but you and I know that's probably not true, and it's not true in my case. But I always really liked that song. When I heard it again through this different lens, I loved it again because I understood the simplicity of what it said and how people would take it, and it rang with a lot of people, like we talked about. So it's funny. I'm sitting in my car listening to Bluesville, and I'm switching the channels, and I really don't go by those 80 channels much, and I hit it. I said, "Oh, it's High on You," and it was right there. I turned it up, and I said, "That's a good song." And not egotistically, just because I could kind of depart myself from being part of it all and just listen kind of as a listener. And believe me, there's a couple lines where I said, okay, well, there's a couple lines where I do say, okay, well, enough with trying to be clever. But even in those lines, they're simple enough to where I don't think, I know for me, I'm not sure how Jim, he might have paid attention to that more than I did. I think the simplicity of it is what really resonated with the people.
Let me ask you then.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say then, what then makes a great song and makes a song memorable? Because when I look at what you've done, Alan, you've got "Rock Me" from Great White, and here we are in 2020, and you hear "Rock Me" and you go, yeah, it's a great song. I mean, you turn it up, and of course, "Eye of the Tiger," you hear. Now, he was talking about you need the vocalist and to sell the performance. Is it sort of everything has to fall into place where you have to have the right vocalist and the right solo and the right words? Or I mean, what really makes a good song? And I'll let both of you answer, and I'll sit back on this.
You go, Frankie.
No, I want to listen to what you say because I've liked what you said earlier. It was nice. Go ahead, and I think I can pick up from it.
I think one of the aspects of that, Mitch, is, and you've heard me say this a number of times, is, and some people put it in the terminology of pleasing yourself. And I've often said, the minute you try and create something in anticipation of an audience, then you become an entertainer rather than an artist. And I think, first of all, you have to do something that speaks to yourself. And again, it's going, there's got to be a standard to it. There's got to be a quality of construction, a quality of content. And I like a little bit of intelligence in a rock and roll content. And when I say intelligence, I mean that both emotionally and even spiritually. There are a lot of dumb songs out there, but the ones that live longest with me are the ones that speak to me on a slightly deeper level. And there's also the aspect of you think you've got something and you think you've got a good song, but you really don't know until the audience tells you that you do and reinforces your thought that, yeah, we've got something here. And of course, the irony at that point is the song is no longer yours. It belongs to the audience at that point, because they don't know exactly what experience you're trying to convey or what you've been through to craft your point of view. They have to see it through the lens of their own experience. So you kind of have to go, okay, it belongs to them and what they associate it with or what they think it means. But, it's an interesting point that Frankie was expressing there, that you get to a point where you can hear something on the radio that you recorded or wrote or produced, and you actually hear it as a listener, and you actually hear it objectively. And it's kind of nice because you sit there and you can react as a fan. And then there are also those songs that you hear and you go, God damn it, I screwed that freaking chorus up. That melody in the chorus is wrong, And you sit there and you go, I'd go back in the studio and fix that right now, 30 years later, if I could.
True. I think, what it is, you guys, I really think that no matter what we do, not only in our business, but maybe more than creatively, but especially with music, I think that people in general can really get a sense of authenticity. So it can be like an amazing, let's use Stairway to Heaven, which no one should ever really use, but then again, you can also write a crazy, ridiculously poppy song that kind of rings a bell in that way, only it's pop, but the people sense, okay, it's authentic. It's not, I used to call it target writing because I have all these slangs. I never really understood why people would get in a room and this might be nice. They're trying to, Alan and Mitch, they're trying to target a listener. And I don't think that can be done because I think the listener feels emotion. If that emotion of that song, they feel it right, and it really rings a bell, again, to repeat myself, they sense some kind of authenticity. I never really put my finger on it, but I know that whenever I was involved with something that felt forced, a suggestion of, it may sound better like this, and then it becomes something more scientific, like formula-based, it doesn't really feel authentic, and as a listener myself, I lose it, including in my own work. I can lose that and be very not disinterested in what I'm listening to.
Alan, just
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, I want to just take up on that with you for a second, Alan, because you were involved with two bands that very much had the MTV generation in mind, that very much had sort of, males, 17 to 25 in mind. When it came to songwriting, did you do that formulaic stuff with a targeted audience and say, okay, I need to speak to this kid who's 19 in Wisconsin, or did you just do what Frankie said and go, I've got to be authentic. I'll write a song, and if they connect, great. And if not, I'll write another song.
Well, I think the first response I have to that is I absolutely fell in love with American rock and roll, American blues, American musicians when I was a little kid living in England. So I was deeply immersed in the feel and the sound of American music. But, you know, if you want to talk about formula, my formula, for example, with Guns N' Roses was don't let anybody mess with them. They are who they are. Let them be what they are. And my formula with Great White was, you know what? I don't want this band to be one more Hollywood hair band. To me, if I'm going to take a point of reference, my point of reference was these guys are more like a 1970s British blues band than anything else. So that was the extension of my formula. And if you want to talk about formula, I mean, think of the fact that the two tracks that broke the band, both of them were almost 8 minutes long, and you weren't allowed to put out a song over 4 minutes at radio. Well, we turned that on its head with Face the Day, and then I looked at that and went, you know what? That was a repetitive dynamic. Let's write a song with a developing dynamic, and we wrote Rock Me, and that was almost 8 minutes long too, and radio loved it. So we beat the formula, and we beat the formula by being left alone and being allowed to do what I wanted to do.
When you
I agree with that.
yeah,
I agree with that.
I agree with that too.
Both those bands, just to reiterate, and Alan, it's being a guitar player. First off, that's how I got started. You know, a lot of my friends and English musicians, and quite frankly, all my idols, they all started and grew up listening to the American, Freddie King, you know, Albert King, Albert Collins, Muddy Waters, Lead Belly, you know, Keith Richards, you know, those are the guys. He's running around with of Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry's greatest hits is like his favorite two records. You know that story. He gets on the train and Mick Jagger's got the same record. They I don't want to say they're ahead of the curve. You know what I always say, Alan? I wish, this is how I do, and in a good way, I wish I would have been born a little bit sooner, because those years, those guys are a little bit older, but they were really in tune with what these blues artists and the American people were doing, more so than the American players were.
Oh,
then
absolutely.
Came along like Leslie West. Then came along a Leslie West, let's say, or Joe Walsh at the time of James Game, where they started paying attention to them as well. But you always go back to Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, Freddie King. You know, there's all of it. There's a big, the English guys are, the guitar players like Beck and Clapton and Mark Knopfler, all those guys I just think are just great artists and great players. That's their roots.
Oh, the sound of them, Frankie, was amazing. I mean, I've got to tell you that when I first heard Howling Wolf, it was one of the scariest voices I'd ever heard. I had no idea what he was singing about, but I goddamn knew he meant it. And it was an incredibly profound experience. And I think that was a similar reaction that a lot of us kids in England had. And, you know, there was a little part of us that all wanted to be black and come from the Delta, you know, because that sounded like the most profound and genuine expression that we had heard, especially coming out of the pop of the 50s.
Powerful stuff. Also, undeniably, totally 100% authentic, period. You know, the power of their music will blow your mind. It was heavy stuff. And the English guys had more of appreciation for it. I really believe that.
Do you know that when the Rolling Stones first went to Chess Studios in Chicago, they met Muddy Waters? Do you know what he was doing? He was painting the walls of the studio. I mean, you know,
they don't used to white. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean,
he worked around the studio.
I mean, he was making an extra buck by whitewashing the walls of the studio. And, these kids from London come in and they're overwhelmed and impressed to meet him. And he's looking at them and saying, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing with our music.
Imagine that? Can you imagine the power of that to have such an effect on? Because the guys in the Stones are hardcore, man. They're great. So you'd imagine have that much of effect on a Keith Richards and a Mick Jagger, and think about it, or Eric Clapton.
Yes.
That's powerful.
Yes, it is.
But then the blues and blues-based music, you can't. Some of the blues nowadays, Alan and Mitch, it's almost kind of some of it that the stuff that I tend to not want to listen to is a new kind of like modern day hip blues or designer blues. I'm not quite sure. I respect what everybody does, but there are things I don't like. When I go back to the old stuff, and I do listen sometimes even in mono, there's a rawness there that the powers.
Frankie, if I just turn my chair a little bit and look on my wall, I have 2 framed albums that have been personalized and signed to me that hang over me. And one's Willie Dixon and the other one's Muddy.
That's
and of
awesome.
course, and of course, my Holy Trinity would have included Chester Bennett, Howling Wolf, but
that's awesome.
The impact of those guys is just immeasurable.
Powerful.
Very powerful.
Authentic.
Alan, I want to ask you
very
this.
Authentic. You can't fake that kind of music. You just can't emulate it. It's something. And Alan, what you said earlier, you're correct. It almost makes us want to have that black in our playing, but we'll never be able to do that. There's something to that, the way that they did it, that the phrasing, where it sits in the pocket, their vocals. We've all tried, and I have it. No, you don't get close.
I want to ask you this. You try.
You try, but at the end of the night, Frankie, you still feel small and white.
Yes,
you do. I think Keith Richards actually says that sometimes. I think there's a part of him as a player and what his big influences were, and I think he might even say that's the stuff we can't do, but we do this. And they found a great niche because I think they're really raw, and I think they're buried in that stuff.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to ask you this because I'm curious. When you see, Alan, from your perspective as a writer, you see a song like Eye of the Tiger, or you see My Sharona by the Knack, these songs that seem to take on their own lives, that become sometimes definitely bigger than the albums they're on, but sometimes even just bigger than the scene that's going on. Do you look at those and study them and say, how can I write a song like that? Or do you go, why is my song not getting that recognition? Or do you just go, hey, that's a great song? How do you look at those sort of impactful songs like My Sharona and Eye of the Tiger?
Well, I'll tell you, a song like Eye of the Tiger, I found the competitive part of my consciousness found it both annoying and intimidating because I went, wow, that feels great. Why don't we have a song that feels just like that one? And then the intelligent side of my brain goes, okay, now you know what you have to avoid. You cannot go close to that. You cannot try and replicate it. You've got to find it from within yourself. And you've got to find the feel and the motion and the emotion that comes from within that you hope will have an impact. But when you hear a great song like Eye of the Tiger, I gotta confess, guys. I mean, part of me goes, God damn it, and it's intimidating. It's like I remember going out to buy a new Foreigner record. Mark Kendall was living with me at the time, and we went home and put it on the deck to analyze it and see what the competition were doing and so on and so forth. And it got to a song called I Want to Know What Love Is. And we both just looked at each other and said, we've got to up our game. we've got to be better because this song is absolutely magnificent. And if that's the bar, we know where the bar is.
Yeah, and that was the bar. That's a fantastic song.
That is the blueprint for every power ballad or rock ballad that came after. I mean, let me tell you, it took the Poisons and the Def Leppards and the Bon Jovis a while after that to get caught up to that brilliance.
And not everybody got caught up to it.
No, and you know what? I think that goes back to the authenticity because, a couple of the bands, they put out these power ballads and people went, oh, what are hard rock bands doing? But they were authentic, whether it's bringing on the Heartbreak from Def Leppard. But by the time we got to 89, 90, 91, and everybody was doing power ballads, you could tell that the record company said, hey, you need a power ballad because radio... And they just got worse and worse and worse. And I think it's because they became less and less authentic. I mean, am I right? Am I wrong? But right?
Well,
that's the corporations.
Right.
Yes, it is. Formula and corporations.
That's these corporations which are now like these huge. They're huge. What, $6 billion corporations? Okay, now we're going to have you guys do this, and we're going to sign this. I don't know that where or if that ever worked, but I know that it wouldn't be attractive to me. But I know everybody tries, and I know people that tried. And speaking for myself,
let's talk about
and
authenticity, and let's look at Eye of the Tiger for a minute. For me personally, and there is the key word, personally, in my personal reaction to that song, it was about one person. It was very clearly a single statement from one position, and it was about the spirit. It was about having the spirit to pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and keep going. And, just in the small way of, trying to put a band together, trying to get signed, getting all the rejection letters, keeping going. That really spoke to me. And it spoke to me on a very personal level. And it was a sense of, you know what? If you have self-belief, then keep going until your self-belief can become self-confidence because you start to get there. And that's why a statement like Eye of the Tiger rang so many bells. Because everybody goes through struggle and everybody thinks, oh, I'm not good enough or oh, I'm never going to get there. And that was the beauty of that song. That song said, get up off your ass, dust yourself down, keep going. And that hit a main vein of consciousness. And that's why that song was so powerful.
And I would imagine, Frankie, that after it became this powerful song, the record company must have come to you and said, we need a part 2. Come on, we need a part 2, right?
Well, I honestly, I don't remember that. I a big part of that, and maybe he saw it far before any of us did, Alan, was Sly Stallone. He grabbed onto that and he ran with it. So maybe at the time you're like, this is amazing and I love it and it's a great song and he's going to, but maybe he saw past what I saw in it and we saw in it. So you have to wonder, maybe he saw the life of that deeper than even the writers did. I'm not quite sure. I do know this, that when we did Burning Heart, which I like it, I love it. I did kind of sense, there's no chasing songs here. And especially us, we can't go chasing Tiger because it's once in a lifetime, if that, as a writer, as anything that you would do creatively. So I can remember kind of when we were doing Burning Heart, it was kind of getting to that point. It was a little bit plotting. I was thinking to myself, we better stay away from trying to, and I don't even think we were consciously doing it, but I sensed to do what Tiger did. So I kind of shifted my view and I said, well, it's Rocky IV and Sly asked us, come up with a song and he had this Burning Heart idea and he loved it and it absolutely worked. But there was a moment where I did think to myself, I don't want this to be like Chasing Tiger. So we changed it around, put guitar parts and, made it onto its own. But that's another thing, Alan and Mitch, you can't chase your own work. That's the kiss of death. And probably we all fall prey to it and either know consciously or don't know. But maybe some more than others, and then you start chasing your songs and the sound of that song, and that never appealed to me because I saw it as a failing effort every single time I could sense it. I was like, ugh, turn me off to the whole idea, and then I would say, well, I'll come back to this. So I kind of like to stay away from that stuff.
Absolutely, Frankie, absolutely. And as far as contributing to Great White, one of the determinations I had once we started to get a little bit of momentum was that we would not make the same record, that each record had to have a slightly different feel, a slightly different approach, a slightly different mindset. Because if you're not doing that, and if you're not progressing as a writer and a player, then all you're doing is making product for the corporations. And believe you me, Mitch, Frankie will tell you that, as much as you can preserve your space and be left alone, and Capitol used to leave us alone completely, still within yourself, you're conscious of, we have to maintain a standard here. And that standard is sometimes defined by sales. And that can mess with your head. And it takes a little bit of strength and a little bit of letting go, a little bit of just let it go. Let's see what happens. And you have to have the courage to do that, to move on and be valid as writers and recording artists.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to ask you this, Alan, because I forget, but, Survivor did The Moment of Truth for The Karate Kid. They did Burning Heart for Rocky IV. They did Eye of the Tiger. Were you involved in any soundtracks? I know Guns N' Roses did You Could Be Mine for Terminator. But what, was that something that was on your plate all the time? Hey, Alan, get us a song for, did the Great White Guy say, hey, get us in a Hollywood movie? Was that always part of the conversation? Get us on a movie. When you see a band like Survivor having these great hits with movie soundtracks?
Well, actually, in the very early days when we were scuffling for a buck, both Great White and GNR contributed to indie movies. And I didn't mind that because they were just indie movies, and it was basically a payday, and a small and modest one usually. And it was just to keep noses above the waterline, keep rent paid, and so on and so forth. But once we started to get a sense of momentum, I was a little nervous, especially with Great White, with the idea of being tied to a huge movie and having a huge hit, because I could see whether that could seem like an initial blessing, but it could also be an albatross around you because you have this huge hit and there's the expectation that you've got to come up with another huge hit. And with Great White, my perception of them was of a working band, that they were a band that, yes, we made records and we made as good a record as we could, but we were about going out and playing live, because that to me was the essence of a band. And of course with GNR, it just got ridiculous. That thing just blew up in our faces. We suffered rejection. The president of Geffen wanted to drop the band before we even started recording Appetite.
Great band.
And MTV wouldn't touch us. Radio thought we were the plague. They wouldn't touch us. And then suddenly, in the beginning of 1988, it was like we were having a nice little barbecue in the backyard, and somebody came along with a 50-gallon drum of kerosene and threw it on the barbecue, and the whole thing just exploded. And tremendous pressure from Geffen to get a follow-up done. The reason for putting out Lives was to buy time before we had to do a quote unquote proper follow up. But there was incredible pressure from Geffen to have another huge selling record. I mean, they estimated that in the first week of the release of the Illusion records, that they were going to do about $100 million worth of commerce around the world. You don't think David Geffen was in my face? When am I going to get my record? To which I replied, David, you'll get your record when it's fucking ready, if you'll pardon my French.
Yeah, they don't get it.
Yeah, good old.
They don't,
For you, Frankie,
bands evolve. Alan, here, I can pick up on that because Alan's talking. Bands, when they're left to do what they do, and if they're good and committed, and there's enough tension works, they evolve. So you change, you get better as a drummer, you may get better as a songwriter, or your perspective changes, so you change. And when bands are allowed to just kind of evolve and grow and get better, I think they do better. It's that constant pressure that, it kind of spins down to the artist. The managers are always pounding with it. Well, give me another Appetite for Destruction. Well, sorry, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
You have to let the artist is a person, so a person grows. When you stop growing, then, you stop, you're getting busy dying instead of living. And art in all forms, especially music, you have to be able to, Alan, that's the confines of this business. It's like a stranglehold. You just have to be aware of it, but shut it out and stay true to yourself, because they do try to pigeonhole, put you in, and as a person,
Frankie,
let's say 2 years
Frankie,
go by.
Do you remember, Frankie, do you remember in the early 70s that Warner Brothers were on a tear with the records they were putting out, and they were the gold standard of a label in the early 70s. Do you know what their philosophy was? Let the artist take care of the music, and the music will take care of the company. And of course, that all went down the tubes when Kinney bought them and asset stripped them. Then there was pressure for the company to put pressure on the artists to deliver records so that they could keep their light bulbs on. But the magic was in that philosophy. Let the artist take care of the music will take care of the company.
And then isn't that why we all at one point in time wanted to be on Warner Brothers?
Yes.
That's why a lot of us said that's the greatest label, because, the Van Halen guys, well, first off, I don't know if you're really going to tell them to do anything, those artists on Warner Brothers back then, they thrived. They got to be artists. They could do their thing. They left them alone. But, Alan, you and I both know that was a rare instance, because, of course, even as they evolved, it all changed. It became corporate. But I always found it interesting that those artists did so well. And then the company did amazingly well, all by letting them either grow, evolve, get great, or just you fall to the wayside, maybe because you're not that you're not talented enough, you just quite don't hit the bullseye and somebody else does. It's kind of like a process of elimination. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just part of a life. It's part of a process of how we live. So if bands aren't allowed, if the people in the bands aren't allowed to grow, they're going to change. And then the band collectively isn't allowed to evolve. They go on the road, they do tours, everything changes. Your focus changes. And I think it gets better until those fingers reach in. You get a million thumbs in your pie. And you're like, I don't like that pie anymore. That did start. And I do remember those Warner Brothers, because everybody wanted to be on Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great label. Now, let me ask you this. We are currently at 45 minutes in. Do we want to continue, or do we want to maybe reconvene for another part? Because there's so much to talk about, and the conversation's been fantastic. I mean, just sitting back as a fan listening to this, you go, wow, listen to these two guys share their experience. It's fantastic. Where do we go from here? Should we go another 10 minutes, or do we want to say, hey, you know what? There's a lot more to talk about. Let's do a part 2.
there's always going to be a lot to talk about. So
I
you
know.
could do 10 more and do a part 2, or if it's your show, Mitch. I'm game for whatever it is.
Yeah, Alan, what do you want to? What are your thoughts right now?
It's entirely up to Frankie. He's our guest.
Yep.
And as far as I'm concerned, I just lit another cigar, so I'm good with whatever you guys want to do.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Monte Cristo A, I'll confess. Absolutely.
Well, okay.
Absolutely. I am.
I do want to.
Now, don't tell me it's not a small world.
Right.
I was just telling a friend of mine yesterday, be careful nowadays. Why? Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Isn't it funny? Small world. We're all connected somehow, even if it's what I call, and Alan, I'm not talking about like Live Nation because I like Micropino. The evil empire is like the internet to me. As much as I love what it offers our business and artists and to create and make something out of themselves, and it absolutely does that and gives them an audience. As an older artist, I'm not all that big on the internet. I mean, I like things like that are fun, Mitch. You know what I like. But there's a part of the internet that I'm not all that fond of.
I know exactly what you like. It's guitars. All guitars all the time. I don't know, Alan, if you collect guitars, but between Joe Bonamassa and Frankie Sullivan and these guys are like crazy guitar guys. I mean, they collect everything, right? I mean, Frankie, you okay, let me ask you this.
Slash does it. He's just not a big blowhard, but he's got everything.
Well, let me ask you this then. What's the prized possession in your collection in terms of guitars?
Alan, you'll notice because I think I might have borrowed one to Mike Nick at one time, but Slash went out and bought about 25 old Les Pauls. So I was getting them as a young player when they were very inexpensive. So they called the grill. It cost a fortune, but somewhere along the line, I picked up about 7 or 8 of them. But when I did it, guys, it was different. You were out on the road, and there was another thing. There wasn't a million people now in the game. I'm going to quote that game of selling vintage instruments. You maybe had 4, 5, 6 guys, and maybe only 4 of them were worth a shit, to be honest with you. So. And now you got a million, but back then they would come to the show and bring something. It was an inspiration. It wasn't a process of hoarding. It was, I like this. And you felt something. You tickle the strings and say, and if I don't like a guitar, I sell it. So the stuff I have, I like. But they used to come to the shows, and nowadays everybody's selling it. It's scary to me. I don't even know if you would know what you're buying anymore. I really don't. There's so many forgeries out there, but...
Yep, I absolutely hear you on that. I do confess that there was a time when I walked into my studio in LA that I had in my backyard, and I looked at my guitars and I went, "You've crossed a line." And the line that I thought that I'd crossed was, I could call it a collection rather than a selection. And I let a lot of things go that I just bought because they were beautiful, or I thought it was really a cool guitar and so on and so forth, but didn't really use it. And I got to a point of going, you know what? These things are built to be used, and I've got a bunch sitting here in this room that should be in loving hands creating music. So I let a lot of guitars go and operated on a basis of have a selection, not a collection.
Hear that, Mitch? That's bingo. And because the ones you don't play, like the Mint, with tags, I've got some, and I had sold some. I don't even want to touch them. They're so mint. But to make the point even more, when I plug them in, they really don't stay in tune. They don't particularly sound good. Well, I can tell you why. They don't have any miles on them. The fretboard, the maple, is so clean. Well, I like the fretboard that's kind of dirty, that's got fingers that are played on it. I've come to learn this over time. So I agree with you, Alan. But back in the days, running around when you had like Billy Gibbons and running around and guys, and the stuff that was out there was, you could do both, but you shy. Oh, that's too clean. I don't know. What am I going to worry about on the road? It's going to get beat up. No. So you always, there was just such a good selection. You went with the one, well, that feels great. And it's kind of beat up and you're like, oh, I wonder where this came from. So you would look for the origin of it as opposed to, oh, look at that. It's such a great car. Then you never drive it. It sits in the garage and you wax it all. Well, that's no fun. It kills time, but
right.
When you get a couple hundred or 300, it's not fun anymore.
300
with guitars.
Well, Frankie,
you go through them. Yes.
Frankie, I think you can be someone who will understand what I'm saying when I say this. When you pick up a guitar that you haven't played for a very long time, it feels cold. It
has no heartbeat to it.
Exactly. It feels cold. And you have to play it for a while, and then it's warm again. And it feels like it's got a little bit of soul in it. But an unplayed guitar gets very, very dead.
I'll often say, oh, how is that, Alan, how's that 1960 Les Paul, the real cherry one that, well, it's a good guitar. Okay, to me, forget it. You're not even near the target. If somebody doesn't tell me it's a great guitar, I have no interest in it. Meaning not how it looks aesthetically. It's a great guitar. It's got a vibe to it. Some of mine, one of my favorite guitars is beat up. It's got mold from where the guy kept his hand behind the bridge. If they don't have that attraction to them, who played this? They never really sound. Nobody used them. Somebody bought them, and I don't know what they did with them. Now, I have gotten a few from original owners, but the guy sat around picking it on his couch, and he's got a few nicks in it. Some of those are really, really good, but the ones I like best are the ones that were played, but somebody loved them. You get done playing your guitar. Remember the days, Alan? You wipe it off. Even the days when you'd wipe the strings off, you put it in the case, and you just loved it. So I try to look at everyone. If it's a good guitar. No, it's not a great guitar. Put it to that side. I went through that already.
All right,
in my
so
lifetime.
I'm going to finish with this one for now, and then we'll do a part two because we're getting to an hour. When you look at the guitars, when you're buying them, both Alan and Frankie, are you thinking, "Wow, Chuck Berry played this. I'm going to have it because Chuck Berry played it," or you look at it and go, "No, I'm buying the guitar because of what it is. It's a Les Paul, it's a Gibson, it's a whatever." Or is it a bit of both where you buy the sort of the great guitar because it's a great guitar, and there's a few that you buy because the guy who played it is somebody that you admire? Frank.
For me, it's a little bit of both. I more go, it's a great guitar, but I also like to go, this is a great guitar, and okay, they only made 6, and Clapton played one like this in a Chuck Berry movie. Later on up the road, you're like, this is a great guitar. Then I like the fact that, when someone might have played it, or like a great 355, like a 59, that sounds great.
Right.
Not real shiny mint. And, then you go, hey, this is what Chuck Berry played. Then it's really cool. But if you're looking at it and you go, well, Chuck Berry played one of these, I kind of feel like, oh, isn't that kind of what the lawyers do? I say that a lot to some of my attorneys. You guys buy those guitars, you hang them over your fireplace, which is absolutely horrible. They dry out, they're no good anymore. Just put them back into circulation because there is a, and you guys, Alan will tell you this, Mitch, there is a large part of this collecting part where these guys that are extreme, Bill Gates, he owns the Hendrix guitar from Woodstock, where these guys go out and pay $1 million, and it's fine and dandy. Is it worth it? Absolutely, if you're them. But what does the guitar do after that? Jimi Hendrix would say, I bought it the day before Woodstock for $300 because it was white. That's the guitar player. The color of the truck of the guitar, as opposed to, well, I got this 65 Dolphin blue hardtail Strat. Okay, so what? Or these custom colors, Fiesta Red. Well, is it a great guitar? That's when I started going, well, not really. You start looking at custom cut. That's where you kind of cross the line for me, Alan, with guitars. You know what I'm saying? You really
well,
do.
Frankie, I'll tell you where I come from as regards that. I learned that guitars are an accident of wood and wire, and
That's
you can
all they are, nuts and bolts.
Yeah, they're an accident of wood and wire, and you can spend $3,500 on something that has no voice. Or I used to have. You remember this Gibson Lerner guitar, the Melody Maker?
Yeah,
and I
sure.
had this little,
absolutely.
I had this little Melody Maker. It was a bitch to keep in tune, but I can't tell you how many rhythm tracks on Great White Records we used that guitar because it had a voice. And it was a cheap guitar, but it just had a voice. For me, does it have a voice? And I don't know if you'll agree with this, Frankie, but I've always believed that when you take a guitar off the wall and you sit there, you can get a sense if there's a voice in that guitar or not before you even plug it in. You can, apart from the feel, you can hear a resonance in the wood.
Oh, absolutely. To me, if it doesn't sound good without an amp, it's not going to sound very good with one. It's really not.
Amen.
You know,
amen, brother.
There you go.
You know
there
what
you
I
go.
call them? You guys, you want to know what I call them, Alan?
Go.
Remember this. They're trees with strings on them. Think about it. I say sometimes, look, it's a tree with strings on it. I'm not going to pay. And you know, Alan, you know these Les Pauls, they're getting $600,000, $700,000 for these guitars.
Oh, I know. It's
now,
crazy.
mind you, they were $285 new, and then the case was another $30. But can you imagine? And they sell. It just blows my mind. It blows my mind. Well, Peter Green didn't pay that much for his famous Les Paul that's out there, and Mike Bloomfield, he left his in a club.
Peter Green flipped his pickups around, and Slash's main guitar, which I gave to him, was a bootleg 59 that was brilliantly put together by a luthier using pieces from the period. And before I took it to Slash, I took out the old pickups and I put Alnico 2s in it because I knew Slash was not looking to replicate 59, but he wanted something 59 plus. So I put Alnico 2s in it. And that's still his main studio guitar.
Yeah. When they're good, you play better because you can resonate, the guitar resonates, and the sound comes out. And when it's the right sound, you play better. The song gets a little better. The solo gets better. Everything kind of gets uplifted. I had a guitar. I'll tell you one specific story. So I bought a Mary case. So this is a 59 Stratocaster.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Gold parts, but dig this. So it had a rosewood. They call them slab boards. Okay, well, rosewood fingerboards. So it was the third fingerboard that was rosewood they ever put on a Stratocaster, and it was gold. And I bought it. I don't remember what it was for. I think I might have paid $30 or $35 for it, and I never liked. I played it and I tried it and I always kind of said, I don't know about this. Not meaning I was too young to say it's not a great guitar. My tech loved the guitar, and he was a good guitar player. So at the end of the tour, I said, I don't know. I said, Joe, here's your tour bonus. He still has it to this day. Now, mind you, it's worked in triple digit figures, but not to me. I mean, it's worked more sentimentally that I gave it to my tech as a tour bonus, but it never, I would try it, Alan and Mitch, I tried it in the studio. I don't really know. Well, this is just a filler part. And I'd play it and I'd say, I don't really like it. I never connected with the guitar. That was one of the best things I did. Rather than give him a bonus of, money, I said, you want a bonus? Take that guitar. To this day, he has it. He loves it. And that's a good place for it, but not with me. It just didn't do it for me.
There you go. Frankie, I got to tell you, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you.
Likewise.
Oh, this was fantastic. So we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 because there's so much to cover. But on that, as we say, merci beaucoup to both of you. Thank you so much. This was a compelling,
no problem.
Fascinating hour of Rock Talk.
We'll talk more. And Alan, it was an absolute. I had a great time. Let me just say it was great fun. Mitch, it's always great fun with you. And let's do this again.
Yeah,
we could talk. Alan can tell us more about business, and then I could say, yeah, and this, because I do like that too. Because I was always half foot in the. Okay, I'm going to produce, and I dig the managers. Dig that. I'm an artist that actually likes the managers to this day.
Yeah, but you've had great one. You had Tom Consolo
well,
for
some of the other guys, Alan will tell you, I might think that, but if you polled the other guys, you might get 4. No, we didn't. You never know.
You never know. But Tom's great.
Some of the guys are not happy, so I was always kind of one side of my brain is in. Okay, I'm a guitar player. I love guitar, and I love to write and be in a band and play on stage. And the other half was, I actually understand what producers, are paying a fortune to Buffer, but he's way talented. What the producer's here for, and why my manager's in my life. So I actually understand the part that people used to say, what's wrong with you? And I always believed in, why are you going to fight your manager? Because that goes on. It used to go on a lot. So we can get into that.
Oh yeah, I want to hear those.
Let's make that for the next time round.
Yes, thank you everybody, and let me just hit.
Okay.
Let me hit end on this tape here.